Jonatan, as a director of programs at Chemsec, your work has focused on how we move from harmful chemicals towards safer, more sustainable materials. And that's exactly what I would like to focus on with you today. Where alternatives to PFAS stand today, where innovation is still mostly urgently needed, and what will it actually take for us to make this full shift in practice. And with that, thank you for being a part of our series, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So let's jump into that, starting with where do the alternatives stand today? So PFAS are used in thousands of applications, from textiles to cosmetics to pesticides, all the way to electronics. In your view, where have you already seen strong, viable alternatives emerge?
I think that there are some sectors where we've had an awareness regarding PFAS for quite a long time, where we can see that we have a strong variety of different alternatives. Textiles, for example, we have plenty of alternatives. Food packaging materials, F-gases, which is a very large volume sector, where you have alternatives for most applications, I would say. And we also see some emerging ones like electronics. So I think in general, there are quite a lot of sectors where we see that we have a lot of alternatives already now, and that we can do the market transition already as it is of today.
Perfect. If I could touch upon the word used, like electronics, could you shed some light as to what we are seeing in that? Because it's such a hot topic always, where people are wondering if electronics will ever be seeing an innovation on PFAS-free.
I think that electronics has been one of the sort of sectors with a lot of growing innovation. I think that they have, of course, it's a big challenge because it's a very wide variety of different uses, from coatings to cables. So I think that the challenge has been to sort of identify all that and understand where the alternatives can be substituted already now. But I think that what we've seen, I mean, we've seen electronics companies push for alternatives. We've seen Apple, for example, state that they want to phase out PFAS. And I think that initiatives like that will make sure that we find alternatives. And I think that for some, like cables and wiring, for example, there are alternatives already today.
Yeah, true. On the flip side, though, where do you think the alternatives to PFAS are still lagging, and why? And is the why coming from technical feasibility? Is it cost related? Is it lack of demand? Or is it something else in the mix that we should know about?
When it comes to sectors, I think that sectors where the awareness of PFAS have been less, I would say like construction, transport, but also electronics, as we talked about before, where we also have seen where we have less alternatives because there hasn't been a focus to identify alternatives. I think that the main reason for why we don't have already now a wide variety of alternatives within these sectors is that the performance of PFAS is great. It's usually very high performance. It's very versatile. It's a sort of simple go-to solutions for many situations. And therefore, it's been less incentives to find alternatives for many uses because there has been a lack of knowledge of the problematic properties of PFAS, and they have performed very well. And that combination has made sure that there hasn't been too much incentive to find these alternatives.
Yeah. No, I completely hear you, and I get that. So it's lack of information, but also I guess some kind of a push is always needed for people to move forward. So in your view, what do you think is the single biggest barrier for society at large to actually move away from PFAS?
I think that the biggest issue is the mindset when it comes to how companies and sectors and trade associations deal with PFAS. I mean, if we look at for a few 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when the sort of PFAS issue emerged, I think that the only reaction that we saw and that everyone saw from companies when it comes to PFAS was there is no alternatives. We cannot substitute these chemicals. It cannot be done. And I think that reaction is still in use, but it has been sort of slightly disappeared in some sectors. And even though the performance is great and it might be difficult to replace hazardous chemicals, the properties when it comes for PFAS, like the persistency, should trigger a more balanced reaction, I would say, from companies, not only having the straight answer, no, it cannot be done. And I think that when it comes to PFAS, it has also been an eye-opener for many companies when we talk about the need for producers to understand and have a greater knowledge when it comes to chemical content, and also that we will see less of this sort of immediate reaction of no alternatives in the future, with companies being more prone to be proactive instead of reactive in the light of what's happening with PFAS.
Yeah, I mean, we are as viewers in this space, we're also seeing a lot of like push now coming from the EU and regulators, right? So I'm just curious if you think that might be what we need to like change the mindset, or you think regulations are not the right thing that will be the one that breaks this mindset. What's your personal view on that?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, regulation is the ultimate market or the ultimate tool to have a market transition. We need regulation to push the market, the whole market. So I think that regulation definitely have a very important role, and it will push. But I think that there is also a lot of other factors that, I mean, consumer awareness, stakeholder awareness, political will. So I think there are a lot of other things that are pushing companies. But ultimately, of course, that the regulation is the ones that will ensure that we have a market transition.
Yeah. And if you don't jump onto the fact that when this transition takes place, we need to have good alternatives ready. So innovation here is really going to be key to drive this actual systemic change then. So if you could direct innovation resources tomorrow, like to wherever you think is the right place for us to go first, which sectors for PFAS users or areas would you say are the most urgent that we need to concentrate on to replace as soon as possible with new alternatives?
I think from an alternative perspective and from a sort of innovation perspective, I think that there are a few that are very important. We mentioned electronics. There are still a lot of innovation needed. We must mention the green tech solutions, solar panels, batteries, fuel cells, which will see a very large growth in the coming years, 10, 20 years, and will be extremely important that we find alternatives in order to make sure that we don't have a green transition happening with a lot of PFAS being part of that. But I also think that other sort of complex uses like semiconductor manufacturing, for example, will still require a lot of innovation. And also, if I can take one final example, I think that we see a lot of focus today on the industrial uses. For example, when it's used in processes for pipes or gaskets, O-rings or sealants, things like that, which affects a lot of different industries. I mean, every industry that produces something is probably impacted by a PFAS restriction for that use. So I think that will also be very important to find and identify which new materials or old materials that can replace PTFE and other fluoropolymers within these uses. And I think that as of today, I think it is important to be proactive. It is a financial risk. If we don't, then we need to make sure that we have a financial opportunity for this innovation. I think that we definitely have that with the regulatory push that we see from EU and also other parts of the world.
Yeah, and this I think brings me to my next question, really for the perfect segue, right? So we talked about the regulations could really push and create a new mindset in the industry. But apart from that, do you think regulations can also be a great support system to push for safer, better alternatives instead of the default that we have? Do you think regulations can play a role there as well?
I think that definitely regulation is an important role in that. I think that what we see now, where we see sort of the threat of regulation in EU, for example, where we have a process to maybe have a ban or a restriction on PFAS, make sure that we have a lot of innovation. I think that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years a tremendous amount of new solutions that can replace PFAS for all kinds of different applications. So for me, I think that, again, regulation is the ultimate driver when it comes to market transition. But we need to make sure that it's worth to do that innovation and to use those alternatives. The companies that invest in this innovation needs to have a predictability, and we need to make sure that we have the restriction also for these uses to make sure that companies that invest a lot of these in new solutions also get the market. So predictability is the key, I think, for these companies and this innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, but thank you for the insight. That really helps us shape the importance of regulations, not just for the mindset for the industry to look for alternatives, but then also to push to look for these innovative solutions as well when the market is there and created, right? So, but if you were to step back and think about any other incentives which are non-regulatory driven, do you think there's something else which is not just non-regulatory driven that could also help us to find a support for transition towards alternatives?
I would say that in the last years, we've seen an increasing numbers of sort of individual initiatives from companies. I mentioned before the Apple commitment to phase out PFAS. We at Chemsec run something called the PFAS movement of 130 companies that want to phase out PFAS. I think that these initiatives like that is also very important to show that there is a demand for new solutions, to show that companies can move ahead without having already having a regulation. So I think it also shows the possibility for downstream users to be proactive, and also that there is an opportunity for suppliers of new solutions. There is a demand that there is a market for them where they can fill their space.
So we're talking about some pioneers like Apple, the example you mentioned, who want to take a step forward and sort of create a transition without yet having a regulatory push, right? So, and hopefully that inspires other players in the market or in different segments to learn and adapt. We already saw an example of that, right? From Patagonia, if you might recall, right? Who also a decade ago started the PFAS-free transition without any regulations yet asking them for that. So I think it always takes like one lead player who takes the lead per sector, and then the sector gets more comfortable taking a risk like that, which is finding alternatives without any regulations asking them to do. So fingers crossed that there are more pioneers like that who are like taking the lead basically in that, right? When I talk to customers and regulators about, hey, what do you think about a PFAS-free future? A big fear in this chemicals policy is always brought up that it's this regrettable substitution where no one wants to swap PFAS for something that turns out to be, in the long run, even worse or just as bad, right? So how we, as scientists, as academics in this area, can guard against that, and without also being too slow, because speed is of the essence to find alternatives as well. Like, it's a really tricky balance and trade-off. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very general question and general fear when it comes to chemicals in general, not only for PFAS. I think that if we look at the situation right now, I think that we have a much better position compared to 5-10 years ago. I think that the PFAS crisis has sort of increased the understanding in the supply chain of the worth and importance of knowledge on chemical content. And I also think that we have seen a lot of emergence of new initiatives like safe and sustainable by design, and we see a lot of alternative assessment frameworks being pushed from different stakeholders. And I think that this will ensure that we have pathways to innovate safer materials. But of course, that means that, I mean, we need also companies to use these frameworks and to use these designs and use green chemistry. But I think that from a scientific perspective, I think that we have much better knowledge now. We have much more understanding on the problem with persistent chemicals, with persistency as a property. I think that we have a much better standing when it comes to understanding what should we sort of phase out already in the design phase.
It requires industry to now champion these, and then we get the long-term data, I guess, then. So yeah, just industry basically adapting fast enough to the innovation. Great. Just looking ahead, all right? So what do you think? Do you think we can realistically ever get to a PFAS-free economy? Or are there places where essential use, be it medical devices or semiconductors, electronics, any of these sectors are going to be with us for decades with PFAS?
I think from a realistic perspective, and based on the economic opportunity and the innovation potential that we see, I would say that we can definitely have a PFAS-free economy in the future. But as you say, some of the uses will be a great challenge. I mean, semiconductor manufacturing will be problematic to phase out in a fast time. But I think that we also have other measures to make sure that we can do that in a safe and good way. And I also would like to stress again that these uses are also a great economic opportunity for companies, and I think that will also push for us to move away from PFAS. And again, I would like to stress also that what we require in order to do that, to have a PFAS-free economy, is of course a comprehensive regulation when it comes to PFAS. We will need to have a regulation that covers all PFAS uses and all different kinds of PFAS in order to move to a PFAS-free economy. Otherwise, we will, as you say, be stuck with the PFAS contamination basically forever.
Yeah, I like what you said there before when you said, yes, it's a great challenge, let's say in the semiconductor industry, but it's also a great opportunity for innovation and new ideas and a new market to be created. So when you look at it like that, it doesn't sound so daunting. It just sounds like a great opportunity for new ideas, new startups, new innovation to come. So that sounds exciting and like motivating then. So thank you for the nice spin on a tricky topic, which is, can we ever even get there? And in one final sentence, if I can have from you, what keeps you hopeful for this PFAS-free future that he said you definitely believe we can have one day?
I think that we've seen an increased awareness among many stakeholders over the last years, and I think that will be the ultimate tipping point, the awareness of the properties that PFAS and PFAS chemicals have. And alongside, we see the innovation is happening. We see a lot of new solutions coming through. And I think that combination of an awareness and also the innovation will eventually make sure that we can have a PFAS-free future.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. So thank you for sharing your insights and just painting us a picture of where we stand with PFAS today and what a PFAS-free future could look like and how we can have that one day. Thank you once again, Jonatan, for your time, for spending your insights and expertise with us, and for all the incredible work you do at Chemsec with your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.